pull the switch. My last, unless I could switch. Yeah. Okay, wasn't sure if this was on. Well, thank you all. My name is Brynn Hirschman from the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Office, and this panel is going to really dive into some of the successes and current ongoing projects that we have going on through these different organizations that we have on the stage today. So we're really excited to dive into these topics, and I got to meet with these folks about a week ago, and there's just really a lot of passion in this group and really forward thinking on how you can work collaboratively to get things done in your community. So we will start out with our first question. I have to switch fingers to unlock my phone. So Scott, we'll start out with you. If you don't mind just telling a story about an outdoor recreation development or an accomplishment that you're proud of, and then kind of tailing into that, what can you attribute the success of your project to?
Hey everybody, Scott Kosiba. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of the Bridger Teton. Eric and Linda alluded to a few of the programs that we've seen a lot of success with our organization in the previous panel. But to me, our nonprofit is we're the partner to the Bridger Teton National Forest, which is nearly 3.5 million acres of national forest, all within the state of Wyoming. And last year, we were able to go to the Jackson Hole Travel and Tourism Board and ask them for $1 million to expand our Ambassadors for Responsible Recreation program. And that program was really born out of the need to do something with just the surge of visitation that we were seeing, particularly in our the forest that bordered the two national parks in Teton County. The Forest Service is chronically underfunded and understaffed, and during the 2020 and 21 field seasons, summer seasons, it was chaos, literally chaos. And so we were able to go to the Travel and Tourism Board as a small nonprofit and say, hey, we need help to expand our operations on the ground, get full-time volunteers on our busiest national forest areas so that they can be educating visitors, they can be mitigating the negative effects of this increased visitation that we're seeing, and put out fires. People were leaving campfires out and raging, and people were not securing their food. And so this last year has been, I think, a huge success, and it's been a lot of fun to really figure out how can we reach visitors who are coming to national forests. We don't have gateways, and we have, I mean, when you have a forest that's roughly the size of the state of Connecticut, you have just a huge swath of different user groups. You have a huge swath of geographic areas that people are visiting. And how can you effectively communicate a message of responsible recreation to all of those folks when people are not driving into a gateway, making eye contact with a ranger, and being handed a leaflet or a brochure saying, okay, you can and cannot do this. And so we really had to put our heads together and figure out, how can we be effective with this? And I think the reason that we've been so successful, and Linda mentioned this in the previous panel, we extinguished over 200 escaped or abandoned campfires in Teton County alone last year. That's a huge success. We didn't have to euthanize any problem bears in areas where we had ambassadors in Teton County last year. That was a huge success. We are a tiny nonprofit, and so our ability to be successful has absolutely depended on our ability to lean on partners. The Forest Service is our #1 partner. The Jackson Hole Land Trust, our community partners in the county and local governments, have been instrumental. And in Teton County, Sublette County, Lincoln County, to be able to lean on our other NGO partners, our other agency partners, and learn what are the bottlenecks, what are the challenges that you're facing, and then how can we improve efficiencies and how can we lean on each other. That $1 million grant, that wasn't spent exclusively in my organization, but we spread that around to the experts that could do the work and the people who really could make that difference.
All right, and Cassie, if you want to kind of follow along with that with Latino Outdoors.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Castillo. I'm with the National Organization of Latino Outdoors. We're present in 21 states with 33 chapters, and we like to say we're volunteer powered. So we have a little over 250 volunteers. And I started off with them as a volunteer and ambassador in 2018. I've recently been hired. I'm now their development associate as of March 1st. And some of the work that I've been doing here, and I'll talk about a particular success, is with Wyoming parks. So through partnerships and collaborations, I think that's where we have our biggest ability to be successful. And last year we hosted a 3-day camp out at Sinks Canyon. And I'll highlight one of the initiatives we have with Latino Outdoors is really expanding the outdoor narrative. What does it look to be outdoorsy? What does it mean to recreate? So just expanding that narrative and offering our stories so that we are represented and we can have a seat at the table or a space in the circle. So one of our initiatives is called Momentos Outdoors. That's Moments Outdoors. And so at Sinks Canyon, this was also a reminder with my partners there, say my friends Angelina and Kyle and Jessica. And we had a small turnout. And I think I was focused on the quantitative, how many people we had. And my friends reminded me and said, no, it's all about qualitative. Let's look at the quality. So I'm like, yes, these moments outdoors. So at this event, we had a family who showed up. And the father wanted to spend his birthday weekend with us. The wife wasn't very outdoorsy. And we went on a hike. Her husband loved hiking and the kids were just enjoying it. We had one of our youngest youth just glued to Angelina and she's the interpretive ranger at Sinks Canyon. And the wife was just like, I'm not happy about this, but she couldn't say no. We were all going, so she went. And then we reached the waterfall. And of course, we took our time. We made lots of stops. There was a lot of sharing of information and snack time, just so that everyone was comfortable. And when we reached the waterfall, her eyes just lit up and was just like, oh, I get it now. He's always trying to get me to go hiking, but I'm just not that, the sports-like person. And then she reached, she's like, this wasn't as hard. I said, no, we didn't have to go fast. It wasn't about how quickly you get up there, but we're doing this together. And now we get to enjoy this beautiful view and have our snacks and lunch. And her whole energy and perspective changed after that. Another moment was we had salsa dance lessons that might want to hit up Kyle for some from Wyoming State Parks for some lessons there. We had braiding sessions. We had a moment where a German family joined our cave. We had a cave tour there at Sinks Canyon, and a German family approached wanting to join the cave tour. And then they joined us afterwards at our campfire evening. And so we had Spanish, German, English, Cajun, if you can count that as a language. But it was amazing to see the two young girls, a German-speaking girl and a Spanish-speaking girl, and using their little bits of English and gestures to communicate and then braid hair. The two fathers there trying to communicate and exchange their passion for the outdoors, for food, because they're going to travel to Denver. So they were exchanging restaurants. And so all of those were like moments to walk away with. And like, this is what it means to build a community outdoors and to spend time in fresh air. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that we're out reaching that tallest peak or climbing the tallest mountain. So yeah, I think those, when we can come together and collaborate and partner and use all of our resources, then we can really work at that initiative to diversify the outdoors and expand those narratives.
That's beautiful. I love to hear that story. Thank you. My name is Angela Emery. I am the former executive director of the Platte River Trails Trust, a nonprofit in central Wyoming. I am also a commissioner for state parks and cultural resources. I guess talking about the accomplishment or the success I can point to with Platte River Trails is we started with nothing. We started with skepticism 40 years ago. We were incorporated in 1982 with a fabulous master plan. So I can't sing the praises of master plans enough. Like someone said in the previous panel, mine was dog-eared and much copied and given around as much as I could. But so we started from a place, as I mentioned, of skepticism. We actually were formed because members of the community had fear of the notion that I'm from the government, I'm here to help build a trail. And what they actually heard was, I'm here to take your land. And so our nonprofit was formed. We're a fairly large board. We're 17 voting members now, 4 or 5 ex officios, with the idea that we wanted this effort to be citizen-led. Let me back up and say, late 60s, 70s, early 80s, the North Platte River in Casper was a dumping ground. It was polluted. It was a scary place. But there were citizens in Casper who had a vision for reclaiming the river, for creating a place where people could safely recreate, as well as have a safe, active transportation network. So again, I guess one of our primary drivers for our success was our volunteers, was our citizen-led group. Today, we have a fully connected riverfront trail system, over 11 miles along the river. We joined forces with the city of Casper back in 2002 to develop the Casper Rail Trail, and we have great plans for the Casper Rail Trail. We're hopeful that we'll be able to reach all the way to Edna's Kimball Wilkins State Park in the near future. We have plans to go further west in our community to a BLM property called the Rim Rock Recreation Area. So we've seen a lot of success over the last 40 years. This is not a fast-paced game. It's a game of patience. I would say that, as others have mentioned, volunteers and citizen-led efforts, just especially in Wyoming, we are a small community. We're several big towns connected by highways, right? So we all know one another. It's important to us that we know one another. I'm not to say that we don't have fabulous municipalities and county entities and people who work there. I can't say enough about those folks that I worked with in my community. They're dedicated and passionate folks as well. But I just really think, especially in Wyoming, it's about the volunteerism. Of course, it's about having a great plan, and it's about having a lot of patience too.
And so, Commissioner, yours is a little bit different of what you'll be talking about. And so just kind of looking more county-wide, and then also more of an ongoing project. So if you'd like to dive into what you're working on.
Well, I'm Tom Ryan from Hot Springs County, and I'm the chairman of the county commission there currently. And I also serve on the TAP commission for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. And this started, if you're familiar with Thermopolis, we have a T-hill that is part state park. The county owns a piece of property that is adjacent to it. And then there's what they call Round Top, looks like an old volcano up there. And in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been an effort, state parks, Wyoming Pathways have got together with Hot City Alliance. It's a group of recreators that are, you listen to all these conversations, it all comes volunteers, and, you know, we're just a small county. Commissioners aren't full-time, try not to be anyway. And so you really rely on those volunteers picking up that. But we also have, in the middle of those two properties, we have about 117 acres of an old runway. Runway's still there, but we've been out of there about 8 or 9 years, and we've had this vision that we could build a hotel convention center up there. And, you know, everywhere I go in my travels as a commissioner or in my other businesses, people tell me they love to come to Thermopolis. That's I hear that everywhere I go. We love to come to Thermopolis, you know, love to enjoy the springs, just take a couple days and go up there and stay. Everybody says love to come to Thermopolis. You know, we have the nicest weather in the state of Wyoming. And I'm not, that's especially when you come down to Laramie, and it's different. But so we've done some studies, and where this all started was we were applying with the Wyoming Business Council for a business ready grant, and we'd submitted our application. And this fall, we started talking to them, and they had a lot of questions that we didn't have answers for. So we pulled our application for a little while to, you know, we started talking about what else are we going to do with this 117 acres. And with all the trails that are already there, access to the federal lands is really close. Just got to cross maybe one landowner. And we started saying, I think this could be a outdoor recreation hub for the area. You know, people just come to Thermop, you come to the hotel and then get on your bicycle and you can ride all day long out in the hills. Or, you know, I saw your post, Michael, the other day about, I think with just the trails we have, there's 12 or 14 miles that connect those two mountains, with hills really, but it's pretty fascinating to see. And so we started down this discussion, and it's just taken on a new life. And so we're applying for a planning grant from TAP to try to, your point on a master plan is there's just so important to have a, you know, all the pieces, you didn't miss a piece as you were putting it together. And so that's our plan. And that's how I wound up on this panel. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Commissioner.
But I'm happy to hear it because, you know, and we're going to talk about why you take this on, but you just hear the same common threads. You know, it's nice having the commission involved because then it brings a little bit more political clout to the project. But we have some skin in the game. We have 110 acres that we'd really like to see developed that would benefit the community. And it's not just, you know, housing or something else that you brought something that brought a lot of people to enjoy Thermopolis and Hot Springs County. So.
Thank you. Caleb, go ahead and talk about what's been going on in the northeast part of the state.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Caleb Carter. I'm the district manager for the Weston County Natural Resource District. And I'm also a member of the Bent Sprockets Club up in Weston County. And that is, we're a nonprofit organization. And we, I guess the group originally formed in 2018 with the idea of taking over maintenance and development of local trails in the area. Several local trail systems that are already existing or in development, as well as wanting to develop ways to get people outside, to expose people to the outdoors, to encourage them to get outside, try something new that they hadn't done before, and feel comfortable being in the outdoors. And we've continued that. I've been with the group now for about 2 years, and we like to say that, you know, we have really, in all reality, we have over 120 miles of single track trail in Weston County. Some of them are trails from the motorcycle enduro race that's out on the national grassland. Some of the trails are on national forest, some of them are on state, some are on BLM. And so it definitely makes for an interesting mix of different agencies that have all come together to make this happen. I think, as I think about what helped to make that possible, I really think a lot of it just came back to collaboration, and some of our other members in our group in the Bent Sprockets Club are also work in natural resources. Our club president works for state forestry out of the Division I office in Newcastle. And him and I work together a lot in our professional fields on our day jobs. And we also work with all of these other entities. We work with the Forest Service. There we go. We work with the Forest Service. We work with BLM. We work with the state because we work with them on managing their lands. We work on coordinating projects that we're doing with them. And so it creates an opportunity for us to then take off our natural resource hat, put on our Bent Sprockets hat, our outdoor recreation hat, and say, okay, we've already got the relationship. Now let's look at how we can enhance opportunities for outdoor recreation in this area as well. And it really has made a lot of those conversations, I think, a lot easier to have, because we don't have to go through that whole process of building a whole new relationship. And so I think that's been really beneficial. We also have support from the city of Newcastle. They pay the lease on 2 of our trail systems that are on state land. And those leases actually pay more than what the grazing leases pay on that same land. And so not only is the state land seeing another benefit from an additional use and additional lease, but we get the benefit of being able to build local trails on those areas as well. So that's been a real benefit. Also, just having people that are willing to put boots on the ground and get out and do the work, building the trails, maintaining the trails. And we always talk about, every time we get together, we talk about all the ideas of everything we'd like to do when we have more time and more money and more people and all that stuff. As our discussions have been, the last couple of days, it's always easy to come up with all those ideas and what you'd like to do. But sometimes I think it's important too to just take a step back and be like, okay, but what have we accomplished? And where do we want to go next with that? And the thing that we keep coming back to is that we really want to get people out on the trails, especially people that don't necessarily feel comfortable being out there, or maybe just don't have the opportunity. Somebody who's always thought, oh, it'd be really fun to go get on a mountain bike, but they don't have a bike, don't know anybody that does that, and they don't have a way to start. We've been having conversations with our cross-country team about taking them out on the trails for practices, getting them out on the trails on their bikes and things like that. We've been talking about working with the school to write a grant and purchase some bikes that the school could then lease out, or that we could manage in some way to be able to get the kids active and feel comfortable like they got a good quality bike that they can get on the trails on. And so that's really what we've been working a lot on lately, now that we've got the trails there, and we're still actively building more trail and continuing to work with these various agencies on increasing those opportunities. But the other thing that we recently were able to accomplish through a grant with Outdoor Rec last year, we were able to come back into the Flying V Trail system, which is about 8 miles north of Newcastle. And we were able to widen several miles of those trail and improve grade and camber and some of those different factors, and improve some trails that were having some erosion issues and things like that. And we were kind of twofold on that. We wanted to improve the trails, but also widen them out and make them accessible for adaptive riders. There's really not a lot of trails in Wyoming that are really actively managed or advertised as adaptive accessible trails. And so that was something we really wanted to work on. And as we're doing that, we were like, well, these trails would also be more approachable by somebody who's a beginning mountain biker, for example, that wants some steeper trails, some windy trails through the trees, but they're really nervous on these narrow single track trails that we oftentimes find. And so our hope is that this is providing kind of a nice progression for people that are wanting to come out. They can ride the easy trails at the bottom, but then there's a progression for them to jump into, hopefully as well. And, you know, it's certainly suitable for strollers and things like that as well, if they were wanting to, you know, use the trails in that way. But through that grant, we were able to, between the trails we widened and some of the 2 tracks that are already existing, we have about 10 miles of trails that would be considered as adaptive trails. But then the more we've learned about adaptive trails is, and Ashley made some good points about this, they don't want to be put in a box. And we realize more and more, they want to know all the information they need to know about a trail, and then they'll decide if they want to ride it or not. And after some of the YouTube videos I've seen, these guys and folks are riding trails that I wouldn't even take a regular mountain bike on. So I'm not a big mountain biker, but the club is working on me, so we'll see. But it's been really fun, and it's been a real learning experience for us to realize, like, oh, they don't want us to go and pave a trail through the forest. Not that you know, I'm kind of exaggerating there, but they basically want information, and they want the freedom to choose and the freedom to be able to feel included, and like they can have access to this area as well. So it's been a real learning process for us on all of that, but I count it as a success because we're learning, we're adapting, we're trying to be more inclusive. And I've learned a ton just the last couple of days on that process. And I think that's the important thing in all of this, is to just keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding, keep trying to do better. And if you don't know the next step, do what you think is right, try to do something and keep learning and improving on that process. And hopefully together we can, you know, be able to make it more accessible for everybody. So.
Thanks. I'm going to actually kind of switch from what our next question was supposed to be and highlight, because we've seen these folks talk a lot about how volunteers are important, and having that group that wants to see this project or see this event or activity happen. So just can you briefly, each of you, and I guess let's start with maybe Cassie. You know, why should you expand beyond your community? What impact has that had for your organization?
Let's see, I'll first start off with saying, not from my perspective within my community, but with the outside community. Here in Wyoming, the fastest growing population are Latinx, Hispanic folks. So thinking about that, how are you making your spaces accessible? How are you making your spaces inviting and open, and changing? I mentioned before, we're talking about y'all are doing great work in stewardship and creating these spaces. But just taking that moment to ask, is this the space that these folks want to use? What are the perceived and real barriers? Because a lot of the times, yes, maybe they don't have access to the equipment, and then you're providing the equipment, or you're covering the fee to the site. But at the same time, it's still, well, that perspective, that perception is like, well, that's not for me. That's not safe. Is it safe for me to go out there? So these are all the questions that I think as we come together with our volunteers, with the people. So there's always in the community, there's always someone, the trusted leader. I always say, like, go to them, find them, talk to them, and get that trust there, build that relationship, and then go out to them, because it's also not just about having a seat at the table, as some of the panelists in our previous discussion mentioned, you know, it's about the relationship building. Sometimes it's the one-on-one, it's really the one-on-one. And then you can find a way, are you comfortable to coming to the table? Because also that idea of coming to the table is a certain approach that not everybody is comfortable with. That's not the way some, and I'll speak for myself, for some Latinx folks, for Hispanic folks, we're not used to coming to that approach that way. That's still intimidating. Yeah, you're offering me a seat, but I don't know, can I speak up? Can I, so again, looking at it from that way, and then this is where you really come in and build those relationships with those trusted leaders within that community, so that then you can find out, oh, well, maybe they don't want to come out biking, or maybe they don't want to come out biking yet, but they want to come out and get to know the space. So it's like, who are you? Do they know who you are? And that's, I think, one of the big takeaways that I've had with Wyoming parks is like, we've done events that are outside of Wyoming parks, so that the community can come and get to see their faces. They get to know me, they get to know the folks. And then later on, when that invite is like, hey, come over to Stinks Canyon, come over to Kirk Gowdy. It's like, oh, I already know folks from there. And again, it's that relationship building, and then that education process can happen, and you can begin to understand and also, again, educate on the rules and regulations, because a lot of that is also intimidating, whether there's a language barrier or, again, cultural barrier. A lot of it is more cultural. And so I think that's where it becomes important to build these relationships and find folks within that community. And so a lot of the times, yeah, volunteers are important, especially within our organization. Like I said, we're volunteer power. We are 11 employed folks within the organization and over 250 volunteers.
Wow.
If that answers the question.
Yes,
I might have veered
that
off.
did. Thank you. And that really gives, I think, a lot for folks to think about too, on how they could maybe improve just a small part of their event to feel more inclusive. Anyone else have any thoughts on that question?
Well, from Platte River Trails perspective in Casper, our original focus, as I mentioned before, was the North Platte River corridor. It was fairly extensive, east to west through the community. So that took us some time to complete and fully connect that corridor. But as we got deeper into our trail work, obviously we became, a trusted source on trail building. So as I mentioned, in 2002, the city of Casper came to our organization and said, would you help with the development of the Casper Rail Trail? And there was actually, that engendered a fair amount of discussion on our board, because, we thought we were focused really exclusively on the river corridor trail. But we agreed to do that, and it went from there for us. So we have the 11 plus miles now of river trail, almost 4 miles of rail trail. We expanded our vision even further a few years ago with a trail that was leading up towards Casper Mountain from downtown. And now, as I mentioned before, we're embarking on a very exciting extension of our Casper Rail Trail to Edna's Kimball Wilkins State Park, with the hope that we can be the first and catalyst segment of the Great American Rail Trail. We're very excited about that. We also are participating with Converse County and the town of Douglas and with them as they work on their master plan for the Great American Rail Trail through Converse County. There's just a lot of synergy there for us. We feel like when you have that visitor coming to central Wyoming with the bike on their car, they may likely want to stay either in Douglas or Casper. They may want to ride their bike to Douglas and back. Of course, eventually we would like for them to be able to ride through the whole state of Wyoming and eventually make it to Washington State. But in the meantime, we want them to stay in central Wyoming for a while. Putting on my state parks and cultural resources hat, I'd like to think that, we want people to see all of Wyoming, right? We know that Teton County is beautiful. Linda, hat off to you. It's a gorgeous place, but there are many other beautiful places in our amazing state. And so we would like to disperse those visitors and let other local communities increase their tourism. Tourism I mean, it's an important segment of our economy. And certainly, as someone mentioned in the panel earlier, Casper, like many other areas, is primarily an extractive energy capital. Okay, we call ourselves the oil capital, and we are. And we're proud of that. But we also believe that there are many opportunities for us to encourage people to come and see all the beauty that we have, which is the North Platte River, Blue Ribbon, trout fishing, Casper Mountain, Edna's Kimball Wilkins State Park. So, our organization, I guess, to wrap up, really felt like, yes, we did start out with the desire to, obviously, to reclaim and take back the North Platte River corridor, create an active transportation network. One thing I also didn't mention is we have a desire to reach deeper into neighborhoods. So the 12-year-old who wants to get on a bike and get on the rail trail or get on the river trail can do so safely from their neighborhood. So our organization, I guess, I feel like, again, talking about our incredible volunteers, recognize that, yes, we're focused on the river corridor, but there's a lot more in our community and our neighboring communities that we can be involved with.
So in the context of my work with Friends of the Bridger Teton, I think about community in two different ways. One is the geographic communities that we have. So Sublette County, Teton County, Pinedale, Alpine, those are communities to me. But I also think about community in the sense of the social and cultural communities that we all occupy. And I do think it's really important that we reach out across those community boundaries in both contexts. I think is really, really important. From a geographic standpoint, the Bridger Teton is in 5 counties in the state of Wyoming, and each of those counties has its own character, has its own community, and the folks who live there, the residents, the people who visit there, they are their own type of people. And so to assume that we could apply a Teton County solution to a Sublette County problem or a Lincoln County problem to a Park County, or, it's inappropriate. But there are a lot of opportunities to learn lessons and to grow from the work that other communities are doing in other geographic areas. So we've been really fortunate to have a really thriving Forest Service, 2 Forest Service districts in Teton County that have been willing to try new things on the forest and work with Friends of the Bridger Teton to do new things to address some of the needs with respect to visitation, infrastructure, educating our users. And again, we were fortunate to have the ability to work with the Jackson Hole Travel and Tourism Board that has a substantial amount of funding that our other neighboring communities don't have access to in the same way. And so, and I'm a Sublette County resident. I've lived in Sublette County for about 15 years now. But to be able to work in Teton County and really develop some really effective solutions using lodging tax dollars in Teton County, and then to be able to model those in our other communities and take those to Sublette and Lincoln and say, you're not Teton County, you have a different type of user, you have a different type of resident, but this is what we did here. How can we take that model and apply that in a way that makes sense for your community? And to me, that's been really effective. And, a couple of weeks ago, I met with the new mayor of Alpine. And, we were talking about this Ambassadors for Recreate Responsibly program. And we'll have an ambassador out on Grays River Road this year, which I'm really excited about. Grays River Road is a very different area than Cache Creek Trailhead in Teton County. It's a heavy motorized use area. And so that model we've been able to tweak and apply to Lincoln County to be effective there. And as we were leaving, we were both kind of joking and just said, well, thanks, Teton County. That was really great. You were able to do something that, Lincoln County would never have been able to do, and then spread that message out so that we can use that lesson So that's one piece. And then the cultural, societal communities too, I think is really important. And it's been touched on a few times. I'm a white male. I'm an able-bodied male. And so the way that I see the world is limited to my lived experience. And to me, it has been just really telling, and it's been really informative to be able to work with folks within the Latinx community, folks within the adaptive community. We've been working with some of our tribal partners too, to understand how do you utilize our resources? What does outdoor recreation mean to you? And how can we help facilitate that? How can we improve access? And just one example of that, I'm really proud of what we were able to do as an organization. During the 4th of July holiday last year, we had a tragic drowning fatality in the Snake River Canyon in Teton County. And it was a Latino man who was celebrating, I assume, and he tragically drowned. And in just evaluating, what happened and what resources we had available on the forest, there was zero Spanish language information at the kiosks that are most used, and there was no information that was directly applicable to that specific user group. And so we were able to, with the Forest Service, with the Snake River Fund, and then with a local Latina-led group called Camina Conmigo, which means walk with me, we were able to work together and provide and build new kiosks that were in Spanish. They were specifically directed towards that user group with messages specific to the primary types of recreation that user group was doing in the Snake River Canyon. And then one of our close partners, who is the program coordinator for Camina Conmigo, Yolanda Vasquez, she actually read through the entire kiosk in Spanish, and then we attached a QR code to that kiosk so folks could scan that and then hear Yolanda reading that through. And so that, to me, it's a great success story, but it also, to me, it demonstrates that it is really important for us to be looking outside of whether it's cultural communities or geographic communities, because we all have a lot to learn. And I say this all the time, but a high tide rises all boats. And so if we're all working together on here and we're all kind of thinking about our broad community, we're all going to benefit from that.
If I may expound on inclusivity a little bit, our organization has dealt with it on a couple of different levels. First, in the boardroom. So about 15 years ago, we realized that we were just very heavily male dominated in our boardroom. And again, I sung the praises of my board members, no fault to them, but we needed more female voices in our boardroom. So we started there with that and made a real concerted effort to bring more women into the conversation. I always, as the executive director, felt like we wanted as many people as users on our trail system as well. So, we recognized that, of course, your marathon runners, your cyclists, your commuters, those were our three core, I would say, hardcore users. But we wanted to see everyone have some kind of engagement with our trail system for many reasons. One, just so they could have the benefit of what we were building. And number two, so that we could have a broad base of support, because, the reality is that we need to have funding in order to do our work. So we wanted all of the citizens of Natrona County to be able to say, oh, I know what that facility is. I use that facility, so that when the concept of taxing yourself or reapproving the optional 1 cent tax came up, that they would have some skin in the game there. So some of our efforts involved, of course, working with our hospital to, try to get non-traditional users who might be advised by a doctor to get out and get more exercise. We also tried to reach out directly to the arts community, thinking that, well, you know, some people, if they're artists, they may not be our traditional user, right? They're not training for a marathon, they're not commuting on their bike, but they certainly are out there hopefully using our trail. So I wanted to express that inclusivity has been front of mind for us for many years. We still have much more that we can do. I'm inspired by the stories I've heard here today. I hope that we can continue to work in that direction, but high tides do raise all boats, and the broader your base is, the better for everyone.
We've had some discussions about inclusivity and community. That's a lot of what we've been talking about lately within Weston County is we're like, okay, we have these trails, we have resources we're developing, but is the community using them, and is it what they want? And I need to look at name tag Cassie. I apologize. I'm really bad with names. I should have memorized everybody's names before we started today. Yeah. Cassie, I appreciate your comments and your contribution to this panel, because growing up in Montana, now living in I'm a small town in Montana, now living in a small town in Wyoming. I'm a white male, like, you know, and I haven't had a lot of exposure to these minority or diverse cultures in communities and things like that. And, you know, as part of our discussions of how we reach out to these multi-user groups and things like that, one of the things that's really stood out to me in this conference today and with comments in this panel is that our master plan efforts need to be more than just how is this trail system going to fit into the life, like the larger plan of this county or this community, but it's really how is this going to bring this community together. Mm-hmm. And the comments, you know, I was having this discussion with somebody just a little bit ago too, your comments about, is this what they need? And is it what they want? Maybe there is a minority community in Weston County, or there are individuals in Weston County that want to go out and do A or B or C, but we're building Z. And that's been one of the things that I have really realized and would like to address more in our discussions around the community is, are we doing something that you want? Are we not? How can we better address that and try to identify those things? And also build those relationships to help people and to reach out to different individuals and entities and user groups to really help them feel comfortable and want them to be able to feel like they can come out and be a part of what we're doing. So I really appreciate those comments and looking forward to having those conversations.
You know, I echo yours. You know, when you're talking about including these different groups, you know, you think it's the way you build the trail or you do that. Simple things like you put up the kiosk in another language, or maybe you're not even comfortable coming out. I thought that was a great point that you know, you got to figure out a way to get them to the trailhead. So you say, you know, now you're here and you can see that. I just think that's impressive to listen, and then you hear things that you know, and you're thinking inclusive, you're thinking of handicap or some other access, but it's just simple access, like just inviting them and making them feel welcome. I thought that was, and I think that talks back to why you go to different areas. That's why you share, because, you know, it's not just, I thought your point of they're all different projects, and what works in Teton might not work in Sublette, but it isn't about the specifics. It's about the general, you know, the funding is all coming from the same pots. And so if you can figure out ways to access that, you know, just the simple things of, you got to think about it in a different way. And you get that by, you know, I live in a small community in Wyoming, and you know, there's not a lot of different diversity. So you have to hear those things to realize those are really simple things. And it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel to include them, but you just have to maybe invite them. And I think those are techniques that you can gain by getting out of your area and hearing those things. And I think that's super valuable. So.
And thank you. Those were really good thoughts on that. And this will lead into our next question then. So, what efforts have you taken in your organization to be more inclusive? Or, maybe now hearing some of this conversation, how could you be more inclusive in your organization? Anyone want to start?
I'll start. So, maybe in the very planning stages that you get out and, you have Latino population. It's not a very big one in our community, but you reach out to them and say, hey, would you come to some of these early planning meetings, instead of just the hardcore recreationists that's, we need to figure out how to build the trail. Maybe we need to figure out if we're going to do that inclusion, you start by not only inviting them to the table, but then saying, we're looking for you to come and talk. So I think that'd be the way in your initial plan is start listening to some of those things and saying, just getting them to the table and saying, then you'll provide that, that those other people will provide that insight for your process. They say, well, I hadn't even thought of that. I wasn't something I didn't have trouble coming to the table. I was already here. So that, just this basic, really simple things, I think could start the process well.
I think for us in Weston County, some of the discussions we have had is we've got a club member that is interested in hosting some women's only bike rides around on some of the different trails. That's one of the things we've talked a lot about is hosting some no drop rides, some no drop runs, just to get people out on the trails in a way where they feel comfortable and they don't have to worry about navigation or anything. They can just come out and explore it. She suggested that, and I think that's a really neat opportunity. And now, hearing Cassie's comments, it makes me think maybe there's other groups that would also appreciate, that type of relationship, that type of opportunity as well, out on these trails, or, whatever recreation opportunities it is that they're interested in. And so I think it was a comment that Sarah made earlier in the panel too, about the Pilot Hill project and how they went out. They didn't host meetings and say, come to us. They went to the groups. They went to the various user groups and entities and potential partners throughout the community. And they went to them and tried to get their feedback that way. And that really struck a chord with me as I thought about our efforts in Weston County, is because I'm like, okay, well, we'll go out in the community and we'll advertise this meeting and we'll go to the fairgrounds, to the event center, and say, if you want to come talk about the trails, come here. But after hearing comments and thinking more about this, I'm like, well, but if there's groups that don't feel comfortable coming to the table in that fashion, then we're going to miss out potentially on a whole discussion that needs to be a part of this planning process. And so that's kind of making me rethink this whole process of this master plan and how we go out and solicit information, how we try to reach these user groups. And I think the other thing that comes to my mind as I think about this is the fear. And I think there's some fear in that process because from our standpoint, because the more people you reach out to, the more diverse responses and thoughts you're going to get, right? And at some point, people aren't going to agree with you. Exactly. And it's really easy. We talk about being in your comfort zone. Okay. I talk to my kids about this at track all the time. And I keep telling them, get out of your comfort zone, push a little bit. And I'm realizing in these discussions today, even as I'm sitting here, I have to get out of my comfort zone. All of us in this room have to get out of our comfort zone to have these discussions, because we don't know what we don't know. And that is scary to think about because I have a vision in my head of what I think Weston County should do, because I have a vision of how I use the trails, how I recreate in the county with me and my family and my kids and my friends. But it makes me really sad to think about that there's others that maybe want to or have their own vision, but they don't feel like they fit into that box that we've created or that box that we think, okay, this is how we do recreation here in Wyoming. And I'm actually kind of excited about the opportunity. I'm excited to hear what it is that I don't even know. So I think if nothing else, let's walk away from this room and be ready to get uncomfortable, be ready to have those conversations and actually listen. And I know I'm guilty of that sometimes in conversations. I get so excited about what I'm talking about that I just start rambling and I never give a chance to listen. And so I hope that we can all take that time to just sit down and just listen.
I think that's a great point. You might have your favorite trail and you yourself are a biker on that trail, and maybe you don't realize that somebody else horseback rides that trail and that's their favorite horseback riding trail, but they don't see it as a bike riding trail because they don't do that. But having that perspective of how other users use the environment that you're using.
It's listening to these inspirational stories. I was talking with a colleague earlier about mental health in Wyoming, and I think it's something that we all are very aware of as an issue in our state. And with Platte River Trails, as I mentioned, we've tried to reach out to diverse groups, but we've never really been able to make a strong connection or get across the wonderful benefits, mental health benefits that can be gained by using our trails. So, that is something I guess I feel is low-hanging fruit that I would like to see my community try to express, and maybe expressing it in some way will then get other people to come out and try to experience that joy or that solitude or serenity, whatever you may want to call it. So I guess I think that's something that's top of mind for me.
Within Latino Outdoors, we just like to point out that we are very diverse as a Latinx Hispanic community. We are very diverse. One, culturally, for me coming in, it's like not everybody's Mexican. We have Salvadorians, we have Puerto Ricans, we have, we again are very diverse. We come from a lot of different places, and we're also first generation, second generation, third generation, and some of those assimilations, or even what we've been seeing a lot too is for folks who have been here in the US for 2-3 generations are sort of wanting to go back. They're missing something, and that's something that I resonate, that spirituality, and it's that spirituality with that land. So making room for all of that, making room for folks who speak Spanish, for folks who speak Spanglish, for folks who only speak English, and not judging, because we also have folks within that come to our events. And sometimes I didn't know if it was for me. I didn't know, I don't speak any Spanish, but I'm Latinx. And it's like, no, we're all here and we're here to celebrate our diversity. And that's also why we utilize storytelling to ensure that all our different narratives are out there, and so that we can celebrate that diversity and celebrate as coming together as a community. You mentioned, and it was mentioned earlier too, the serenity part. Yes, I love going outdoors, and a lot of folks love going outdoors within our community to spend that quiet time. But then there's also another conversation about spaces with noise allowance. I know it was spoken earlier today, and I think the noise allowance reference was made to motorized vehicles. We are a very celebratory type of culture. We love our music. We love coming out with our big families, so we're noisy, and we bring our music, and we like hanging out by the river. We like picnicking. So thinking of those spaces where those can be created so that we feel welcome, and that we just don't have to hang out in the local park, because the local city park is where we have more of that infrastructure allowed for us. But it's like, get us out there, because we want to be by the water. We want to be on some of these trailheads and Yeah, so making room for both, you know, all of the different ways that we can recreate and we can enjoy and have that relationship. For a lot of us, it's a relationship with the land.
Great points. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I can just comment quickly on this. I think I feel very fortunate with Friends of the Bridger Teton because we're a young nonprofit. And when I started in this organization, we were a staff of one. We were a friend of the Bridger Teton. And so in order for us or me to be successful, it really required collaboration and bringing in a diversity of thought and you know, a large swath of voices. And that has been, to me, a really important factor for our success, because I can't do it all. My tiny staff cannot do it all. And so we do need to be engaging with a variety of different user groups or people and folks who interact with the forest in different ways. And so I feel really fortunate that that is just ingrained in the fabric of our organization, just purely out of necessity at the beginning. And that's, I think, will continue to pay dividends for us moving forward, just because we've seen the benefit of hearing from you know, a wide swath of opinions and voices and leveraging the support from other partners. And we'll continue to do that even when we are more than just a friend of the Bridger Teton.
Any other thoughts on that? And I'll just kind of round it out with this last question, and then we'll hit just a few of the questions we've received from the folks in the audience. But, you know, we've talked about, you know, how we can be more inclusive in our organizations, what has been working well. So what do you envision for the future of your organization? And of course, keeping in mind with Angela, that, you know, there are maybe terms with positions, or maybe it is a group that you're hoping to pass on the work. So what do you envision for your organization, even if you may not be there in the future?
I guess I can go first.
Go ahead.
We are the partner to a national forest, and we are one of the few forest-wide friends groups in the entire system. There's not really a model for what we're doing in the forest system. We have a few analogs in other parts of the country that, you know, I have a good relationship with, and again, we share thoughts and ideas. But the needs on the forest and the needs throughout the system have changed just in my short tenure in the organization. And moving forward, I think it's going to be really important for my organization or any organization that partners with a federal or state agency to be responsive, to be flexible, and to always be listening to the needs of our land managers about what are the gaps and how can we fit into that role? What do we need to be doing to solve that problem? So we'll be pumping toilets this summer. That's not something I ever thought I was going to be doing. I won't personally be doing it, but that's a need on the forest. And in order to, you know, improve, to make sure our users have a good experience on the forest and the forest doesn't have to lock all the toilets, we'll be pumping toilets. Next year, that may not be the case. But for us to remain a very nimble and adaptable organization is going to be really, really important for the future. And just this year, the funding situation within the system has shifted substantially. And so in the past, Friends of the Bridger Teton has helped fund trail crews. We had a catastrophic wind event in 2020 that it knocked in, hundreds of miles of trails in the Jim Bridger Wilderness and the Teton Wilderness. And so we pumped in a substantial amount of money into those two districts so that they could hire crews and get those areas reopened up. And it's been a multi-year process. That need isn't necessarily there now. The need now is how can there's a lot of money floating around the feds right now, but the capacity is still very limited. And so finding creative ways where we can work with our federal partner and get the work done so that we can help our partner be the partner to the land, be the partner to its constituents. And it's going to look different from day to day, or from year to year, rather, hopefully. And so to be nimble, to be flexible, to be responsive, I think that's going to be a through line in our organization, long beyond my tenure, I hope.
Yeah, if there's anything we've learned in the past 3 years, folks, it's to be flexible to whatever may go on. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I had thoughts and now I might be scattered because you mentioned something. I'm like, oh yes, oh yeah. One of the things I do envision is that our organization continues to grow because it creates leaders and it hones that stewardship and conservation skill set for our Latinx leaders. For me personally, it opened a pathway. I had a career with public media for 15 years. And I found my joy through LatinoOutdoors, left that career, found my way here to Wyoming through the Teton Science Schools, because I learned of them through LatinoOutdoors, and that opportunity was created because of my volunteer work with LatinoOutdoors. And then I made my way to Laramie to finish my master's. So I would love to see more of that and the support from folks so that more of those pathways are created for our Latinx community members. Also, right now, yes, there's a trend. There's a lot of funding. There's a trend for diversity and all this access to money, but I also want to see more of that individual financial sponsor, people supporting us that way too, individuals along with the foundations and the government. But so yes, that's one thing it's another thing I'm envisioning for us. We're celebrating our 10 years. We started off with a blog in 2013. A year later, we started with programming in California. Now, we're again present in 21 states. Another thing I hope is that we create a chapter here in Wyoming, or at least more affinity groups like Camina Conmigo, because they are making a difference. They are in Jackson Hole, but I want to see that in Laramie. I want to see that in Rock Springs. I want to see that in Cheyenne, because yes, we're present and we need that support and we need that community so that then we can come as a group to your locations and feel safer and feel more welcome too as we come together in a group.
Right. Well, obviously, Platte River Trail's 40 years old. I hope that the organization continues for another 40 years. As someone mentioned, hopefully the organization will continue to be nimble and creative. I think they are. I think we're definitely traveling down pathways that we never envisioned we would when we first were formed in 1982, specifically reaching out to a state park, to a BLM recreation area, deeper into neighborhoods. I hope we can be creative. We are, so there is that tightrope, right, between doing what you do very well and expanding beyond your comfort zone. Great to do that. But, I think one of our areas of success is that we stayed pretty lean and mean, and in Wyoming, that can be, cash is king, and you just never know when the next downturn will come. So I would say that we've followed that lean and mean philosophy pretty well. But I do believe there are lots of opportunities for us, maybe even helping other organizations to create pump track areas that are near our trailheads. They're just really, the sky's the limit. It's just a matter of doing what we can do well and staying within our means. And so we have longevity and sustainability.
Anyone else like to talk about how they envision the future of the organization?
Yeah, I think, it's hard to say. I guess from my personal standpoint, some of the things I think is, maybe I'll approach it as opportunities that I see for our group in Weston County. I think one of the things we've been talking a lot about is wanting to get people out on the trails, hosting more events. And I talked a little bit about that. But even like skills events for kids. Last fall, we were invited to come and participate in the back to school bash that our community put on. And we put together an obstacle course for that. And had kids bring their bikes and come down and ride through the different obstacles. And that was a big hit, and it was so much fun. In fact, we didn't even have enough volunteers to assist all the kids, getting through it. And there was all these parents and kids that came down to the back to school bash and didn't even realize that we were there. And then their kids are like, "Oh, we're gonna go get my bike." And so then they're like, "We'll be right back." And so we found that as an area that we're really excited about. We've got some other community events where we're going to hopefully set up some similar activities for kids to get them out. And our hope is that we can continue events like that, maybe do some more bike rodeos, which we've also done in the past. But really then taking the next step and actually getting people out on the trails, as well, hosting events to get families out there. That always makes me really excited when I see families out on the trails, because that's one of the big ways that I like to enjoy the trails. And I think that just inspires hopefully the next generation. But I think my vision for this has grown immensely since being at this conference, and that's great. That's one of the reasons we're here. But one of the questions that keeps coming up in our collaborative meetings is, we have all these great ideas, but they're all trails. And there's nothing wrong with trails. I love trails. But outdoor recreation is so much bigger than that. And I appreciate the conversations you've had that have helped point that out. And there's probably user groups in Weston County that have a demand or a desire to do something that we're not addressing. And I'm hoping that we can take steps to address that as well and find opportunities to, also bring in those user groups. And we're called the Bent Sprockets. When the club first formed, they were kind of a mountain bike enthusiast group. But we have users now that do Spartan races, that do a variety of bike races, that do rock climbing, trail running, marathons, a little bit of everything. And I'm hoping that we can continue to build that diversity and reach out to other user groups that we're not connected to or addressing, and also bring them in, because really at the core of our values as a group, we really just want to get people outside active and having fun with a smile on their face. And I think if we can accomplish that, I think we're winning. So that's what I'm hoping for.
That's great. Wonderful work being done up in Northeast Wyoming. So we do have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to hit some of these questions, hopefully maybe one or two that were asked out in the crowd. So, looking at the area where your organization is coordinating, managing, or facilitating, how do you adapt to the rapid change that we're seeing? How have you had to adapt over the past few years?
We got our 501c3 status in November of 2019, and very quickly we're hit with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I think we were born in the chaos. And so, as I mentioned before, we've grown up as an organization that needs to be adaptable, that needs to be responsive. And that's something that will continue moving forward. Who knows what the next 5 years, 2 years are going to bring. And so, I think for us, having had to, just really jump into the world during the pandemic and really help the forest with, the on the ground, maintaining human waste and getting people to put their fires out and store their food and deal with, motorized, non-motorized conflict. And it's, I think it'll benefit us in the long run that we were kind of born into that chaos of the COVID pandemic. So, I think we'll always continue to be nimble, and that start kind of helped us out.
Any other thoughts?
For us, it's been our employee size within the last 8 months. 5 new employees came on to Latino Outdoors, and that's to help support our volunteers and create more virtual programming. COVID also brought in the fact that we needed to provide more virtual programming. So we have that. Also, I lost my thoughts there. But I did want to say that tomorrow, because part of this is, yes, I'm plugging in my event for tomorrow. So last year we had a Semanitas outdoor event at Kurt Gowdy Park. We had about 12 participants show up. Tomorrow we're in Rawlins. We're partnering with Wyoming Parks, Carbon County Library, the Wyoming Latina Youth Center. And as of yesterday, we had 36 participants registered. So if you know anybody in Rawlins, again, we're inclusive, everyone's welcome. Semanitas Outdoors focuses on our youth. So we also realized that we needed to create more programming that was centered on specific demographics within our community. So Semanitas Outdoors, Semanitas translate to seedlings, really focuses on our Latinx youth and their experiences with the environment and in the outdoors. So tomorrow from 5:30 to 7:30, we'll be at the library hosting some seed planting and other activities, piñata and all, because we're also celebrating LO's 10-year anniversary.
Yes, and a great way to show adapting to a change too, and that you had the event before at Kurt Gowdy and now you're having it in an area where there isn't a state park there, and yet you have over almost triple the people. That's amazing.
Well, again, we've been around for 40 years. I've not been there that long, but what we've seen is that change is inevitable, right? So it truly is. So for us, that means that some years or some cycles, we have a bit more funding than others. Some cycles we're afraid we don't have enough money to keep our 1 or 2 staff people going. So, again, we always try to have great plans. Our board is very dedicated to doing semi-annual deep dive into planning. Every 2 years we do that. Every 4 years we take an even deeper dive so that we have plans ready when opportunities come our way. We try to adapt to what's available to us. So in Natrona County, we've had a couple of new properties that became available through BLM, or that the BLM is working on now. One is the Rimrock Recreation Area that I mentioned earlier. There's another acquisition, the Marton Ranch property. So we're always, have those kinds of opportunities just in our binoculars, so to speak, wondering if those are areas that we might be able to connect to, if we at least might be able to come to the table and be a part of the conversation. So I hope we're around for 40 more years. I hope we continue to have engagement in our community. That's my hope.
Well, I'm representing a county, so we're not terribly flexible. A lot of the things that we're tasked with are set by statute. And so I don't know that question is, I also have a business that I own, and it's a lot easier to be flexible when you're not bound by quite that many constraints. But the one thing I've worked hard at being a commissioner is, when I got on, is I hear forever is that's the way we've always done it. And I have worked and worked to stop that, to stop hearing that. And there's been times I actually told our treasurer early on, I said, well, then you've always done it incorrectly. She didn't like that very well, by the way. So
Honesty.
But that, it's hard to be super flexible when you're bound by as many things that we're obligated to do, and you're talking about public money. So I'm probably not the best to say in that regard how to be flexible.
Well, I guess then, Commissioner, for you, how is your county, you have seen an increase in use to Hot Springs State Park and just the surrounding areas. I myself have gone there for a spring break vacation for 4 days. So how have you kind of seen changes in your county in the past few years?
You know, COVID obviously was the biggest change. You know, it was beyond fathomable, some of the things that went on. But probably the thing that we've seen the most in our county is the huge uptick in people moving there. You know, they're coming as a county. You know, they're coming and how do you know, we're welcoming, but there's not a great way to provide services for them, because maybe they come, we have great internet and they're working from home. So they're not necessarily a business that's generating much revenue for us, but they still demand services. So those are issues that we're struggling with. And you know, we just opened a new subdivision, 85 homes in Thermopolis. I mean, that's a huge thing, and half of those lots have sold in less than a year. So those. And I don't think very many of those people are from Thermopolis that are building those homes. So those are issues that we're grappling with. We're also how, you know, all this discussion has been about volunteers and community, but those people come, are they going to serve on our local school boards? Are they going to run for county commissioner? Are they going to be serving on all the planning boards, the library board, all those things? You know, they're going to want services, but are they going to give us, are they going to volunteer to coach Little League? Are they going to, I mean, all those things, and those are deals. And I don't know how we're in the process of trying to understand how to grapple with that as all these people are coming. So
yes, how to probably have a community that, of course, folks have been a part of for so long, but be able to welcome in new folks and introduce them, whether it's the Wyoming way or it's a new way of being a community, and just constantly expanding upon that, I bet.
It's an issue. You know, you have people that have been there their entire lives, and you have people show up and say, hey, we don't want to do it that way anymore. And you're like, don't bring your ways. I mean, it's a balancing act that especially a community the size of Thermopolis is struggling with.
Yeah, I think it's great too to have commissioner or county representation here on this panel to kind of see the differences, you know, between nonprofits, state, maybe some working with federal programs or agencies, how it may differ, the challenges or the ways that the groups have to adapt. So this has been a really wonderful discussion. I want to thank all 5 of you for coming down to Laramie today and bringing your thoughts and being open to have these discussions on what you've been doing in your organization and maybe where you can go next or how you can improve. And so I just give all of you out in this audience, please reach out to these folks if you're interested in how their organizations began, how they're making these partnerships happen, how they've learned to have those tough conversations about something that they may really not know about themselves, whether it's with Latino community, the tribes, with disabled folks. You want to be able to have those conversations. So please reach out to these folks to see what they're doing in their organization and their community, and see how you can maybe take that next step in your project or your community. Thank you all.